session in the chamber about being a parliamentarian. Officials will be on hand to help in any way possible. Obviously, members will be provided with IT equipment, security passes. They'll be shown where their offices are. There's a lot of work goes into making sure that the session gets off to the smoothest start possible. There's the kirking of the Parliament next Wednesday, and there'll be as many opportunities as possible to bring new members together so that they get to know one another. They'll be working closely together. Many will be, away from home for most of the week. So it's really important that we do a lot in the first few days.
And actually, in the last session, we were in the midst of COVID, so that those kind of cross-party relationships didn't build up in the same way in those early stages, did they? Because people were having to be socially distanced, and that induction was having to take place in sort of smaller groups.
Yeah, absolutely, Kirsten. It's a fact that I didn't actually chair the whole chamber together until almost a year in.
This is just, sorry to interrupt, Anna Sarwar is just arriving now at the Glasgow Count. He looks happy enough. You carry on, Alison Johnson.
Yeah, it took almost a year to have us all together in the chamber, with the atmosphere that brings. So it is really important that we get to know one another as soon as we can. There'll be a lot of new faces for whoever is in the chair, chairing.
Yes.
Sorry,
we're just going to listen to Anna Sarwar.
Made the argument for change, but ultimately it's an argument we lost. But I want to say thank you to our fantastic candidates, our activists, and all those people right across the country who vote for us and voted for us in this election.
Do you blame the Prime Minister?
Look, throughout this election campaign, I have tried to make this election about Scotland. I'm not going to change that today. Is there a national wave, though, that we tried to overcome but failed to do so? Yes, but right now my focus is on what this election means for Scotland.
Should he take responsibility? Does he need to take responsibility?
I said what I said back in February, and I stand by that, but I'm going to focus on what this means for my party here in Scotland. And my party is hurting today, and it's my job to hold it together.
Will you stay in post, Anna Sarwar?
My party is hurting. We're disappointed. We advocated for change. We didn't win that argument, but it's my job to hold us together, and that's the job I intend to do, and we will continue to fight for the change we believe Scotland so desperately needs.
Does the SNP have a mandate for Indy Ref 2, Anna Sarwar?
I don't believe the SNP will win a majority in this election campaign. I don't believe this election was about independence. I think this election, to be honest, was about a general dissatisfaction with politics. And sadly, there was a national wave in terms of that disappointment, and that's a national wave we failed to overcome.
Did you get the strategy? Did you get your strategy wrong, Kieran?
Look, we were right to focus on making this a constituency-based election campaign, because I was very clear when I took on the leadership 5 years ago that my ambition and my intention was to change the government here in Scotland and to get to work to improve the outcomes for people right across this great country. And that's the ambition we had going into that election. That is clearly an ambition we have not met.
What needs to change in Scottish Labour after these defeats?
Say that again.
What needs to change in Scottish Labour after these defeats?
Look, we advocated and made the argument for change. The tragedy of this election campaign is that despite all the arguments we wanted to make about the National Health Service, the future of our schools, about tackling homelessness, building homes, having a government that works here in Scotland, sadly it seems that that's not what the election became about. It became about a national mood and a national dissatisfaction, and that was a mood that sadly we were not able to overcome.
Do you still reject the notion of a coalition with Reform?
Reform have no part in terms of any kind of ability to form a government here. I'm of course disappointed that we are going to see Reform MSPs elected, but let me make a broader point, and this goes beyond just the politics within the Labour Party. I think this goes for who we are as a country. I'm sick of politicians who want to use people's legitimate concerns to divide this great country. And sadly, it seems that those who seek to divide us and use people's frustrations to divide us are going to win the day today. But I still ultimately believe that the politics of unity and change will win this country, and I look forward to being part of that fight.
How will you feel if Labour finish behind Reform?
Right, that is an extraordinary moment, I think it's fair to say. We've had 7 seats declared. We've got 122 seats to go. And Anas Sarwar has walked into the
feel
Count
like
Centre in
finished
Glasgow and effectively conceded. I have to say, at the start of that, I thought he was talking about the English results because a lot more is clear down there. And he was using some of the same phraseology as Sir Keir Starmer was using this morning. Disappointing result for us. We made the argument for change and we've lost. My party's hurting. It's my job to hold it together. Once again, he is coming out with that when there are only 7 constituencies declared. There are still 122 seats to be allocated. Bernard, huge moment that, isn't it?
It's a very, very significant moment. Normally, that kind of speech in that tone, and the tone is all important here, is what you would normally expect when all the results were in, when a leader would say, we have to take stock about what's happened, we have to listen to what the electorate are saying, and any leader who goes down to a very significant defeat, and this will be a significant defeat for Labour because the trajectory is that at every successive election in the devolved era, they go back the way. He will consider his position, despite the fact he said, my job is to hold this together. You could almost read from that that the implication is that he is going to soldier on. But I think when the results are in, he will take stock of the situation. But it's an extraordinary statement to make this early in the afternoon. But remember, Keir Starmer was doing the rounds at Counts this morning, and the reason why the Prime Minister was doing interviews that early was that he could hold a line before the deluge came, rather than having to answer for it at the end of the day when the full picture is there. And in a sense, what Anas Sarwar was doing there was giving the interview early before more bad news comes.
Well, as Bernard was talking there, Douglas Ross left the set and Alan Roden came and took his place, fortuitously for us, because this is quite a moment. Alan Roden, a significant player in Labour circles for many, many years. You know all these people. You've run their campaigns in the past. Anas Sarwar effectively conceding after 7 results of 129 are in. What do you make of it?
I really feel for Anas and his team who've worked so hard for the last 5 years to try and get themselves into a position to form a government. He'll be hurting. The people around him who have put so much time and effort into this campaign will be hurting as well. But he's made the right call there. The early results show they're not making the breakthrough in the constituencies. So I think, as Anas said, the party ran a very constituency-focused campaign, focused on those 38 target seats. It didn't focus on the regional list top-up in the way that the Scottish Conservatives did. It made that choice because to form a government, you need to win those seats. If you only focus on the list, which Labour did in 2021, you're not going to form a government. So it's boom or bust, and it appears it's bust.
Oh, that answer is kind of almost ignoring the fact that in the middle of this Holyrood term, we had a general election 2 years ago. Labour went into that election with 1 seat in Scotland, and they came out with 37. After that count, in this equivalent programme 2 years ago, we were talking about Anas Sarwar and the kind of yellow brick road that was paving the way straight to Bute House, his first ministership, everything that was going to happen. It was it was an absolute bloodbath for the SNP that night, and yet here we are 2 years later, and he's talking like this at this stage in the day. What's gone wrong in 2 years?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, and the focus has to be on what's happened in Westminster. If the UK Labour government had delivered the change that it promised the voters and was popular, I think Anas would be heading towards Bute House right now. But we have seen huge levels of disappointment with the UK Labour government. Anas tried to separate out the Scottish party from that. He called for Keir Starmer to go a few months ago and try and narrow the focus of this campaign onto devolved issues, like you mentioned, like the NHS, for example. But the reality simply is, for most voters, they still just see that one Labour Party, and therefore Anas got punished because of that.
Bernard, you're shaking your head.
I mean, there's lots of evidence that it's horses for courses at individual elections. In 2010, even though Labour lost power at Westminster, Labour in Scotland had a very, very good night, even when they were losing power throughout the United Kingdom. Ian Gray at that point must have thought, I just need to sit tight for another year and I'm in Bute House. But 1 year later, not 2 years later, but 1 year later, The SNP bust the system and actually got that majority. So you say, why can everything change in such a short space of time? Because the voters are not stupid. It's horses for courses. And what turbocharged Labour's performance in Scotland in 2024 was a sense that people in Scotland knew that the Conservatives were on their way out and they wanted to give them a shunt out the door of Downing Street, and a lot of them went back to Labour. It would have been any Labour strategists who thought on the basis of a Westminster election that this can just transfer into a Scottish election with a different context is not reading this stuff accurately, and they're not reading the stuff going back. Anas Sarwar, this result is not on him. This result was made in 10 Downing Street. Keir Starmer ought to carry the can for this. And what was happening when Anas Sarwar made that speech calling for the Prime Minister to go, Anas Sarwar would have known that every Labour activist knocking on the door, because they were telling me this, they were getting the same thing time after time after time. It's all the Prime Minister's fault. And although I always say, never embark upon a strategy if you can't see it through. If you move against a Prime Minister and you don't take him out, you end up looking weaker. And unfortunately, that was the dynamic in relation to the call that Anas Sarwar made. But I understand why he made it, that he was effectively gambling that by putting distance between himself and the individual who is unpopular, who is driving the result, that he might be able to cut through. That I always thought was wishful thinking.
Yeah, we're looking at Jackson Carlaw there. His Eastwood declaration is imminent. Very tight. Apparently, Bernard's saying he's out.
Not the face
we
of
also,
the man who's winning.
well, yeah, we saw John Swinney walking towards the stage, also in Perth. His Perthshire North declaration imminent as well, we're told. We'll bring you both of them, obviously, as soon as they're happening. Ailsa, what do you make of what you're hearing? I mean, there's basically, right, what Bernard's saying there is there's evidence that there's a complete blurring of what we're voting for here in the eyes of the electorate. No matter what Anas Sarwar says, but this is a referendum on the SNP, on their years in power, time to get them out of office. The electorate are going in and saying, well, I don't like Keir Starmer, so I'm not voting for Labour. Would you go along with that?
It's not quite like that. There's two things going on. When we ask people, are you voting according to what's going on in Scotland or what's going on in the UK as a whole? And we know that in each devolved election, the number of people saying, or the proportion of people saying, we're voting according to things happening in Scotland has gone up and up and up. It's down slightly in this election, but it's hovering around the 60% mark. And it's around 60% for Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dem. It's higher for the SNP. But what's remarkable in this election is that Reform supporters are the least likely to say that they're voting according to what's going on in Scotland. They're voting according to what's going on in the UK as a whole. That's one thing. The second thing, though, we know that if we look at Labour voters in 2024 and we ask them whether they're going to vote Labour in this election, and we then evaluate how they think the UK government has handled things since 2024, then there's a clear relationship between if you think that the UK government has done a bad job, then you are much less likely to vote for Labour. And that's among people who are already Labour supporters. But can I just talk about Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley? Because I think that's really interesting for a number of reasons. One is it's interesting because of the sheer scale of the drop for the Conservatives and the increase for Reform. Now, that might not, and SNP obviously has come out ahead. That's perhaps not surprising in a constituency that was almost at 50% support for Yes and almost at 50% support for Leave. But what it does suggest is that the YouGov MRP is the most accurate of all of them.
We're just watching Perthshire North. I think there's the returning officer. Here's the declaration. John Swinney's seat.
I, Thomas Glenn, constituency returning officer for the Perthshire North constituency of the Scottish Parliament, do hereby give notice that the votes cast for each candidate at the said election were as follows. Angela Bailey, Scottish Labour Party, 2,240. Murdo Fraser, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 10,171. Claire McLaren, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 2,741. Kenneth Morton, Reform UK, 4,620. And John Ramsay Swinney, Scottish National Party, 16,414. Additionally, the number of ballot papers rejected was 158, 22 voting for more candidates than entitled to, and 136 being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty. The percentage poll was 58.4%, and I hereby declare that John Ramsay Swinney is duly elected, and I would like to invite Mr. Swinney to make a statement, followed by other candidates.
So here's the First Minister. Let's hear him.
Mr. Returning Officer, it's my pleasant and first duty as the elected member of the Scottish Parliament for Perthshire North to express my thanks to you and to your team here at Dewar Centre and throughout the county yesterday for the efficient way in which this election campaign and election contest has been conducted, and for the efficiency of the declaration today. Can I also express my thanks to Police Scotland for, as ever, providing the important security around the democratic process upon which we all enjoy. It has been the privilege of my life to serve the people of Perthshire for the last 29 years, and I look forward to continuing that service in the next Scottish parliamentary term. I have always acted in a way to prioritise the service of the people who chose me to represent them in Parliament, and I will continue to do so. And I express my warmest thanks to my constituents for supporting me once again so emphatically in this election today. Can I also express my thanks to the SNP team in Perthshire North, led by my agent Pam Muir, who have, to say the least, run the campaign without me largely in attendance because of the requirement of me to be around the country leading the Scottish National Party campaign. But I could not have achieved this result without the steadfast support of Pam and my team around the constituency. So to each and every one of you who've worked so hard for this moment, please savour it and express my warmest and share my warmest thanks for all that you have achieved on behalf of the Scottish National Party in Perthshire North. Thank you very much. We are at the very early stages of the election count across the country, but it is becoming clear that the Scottish National Party is going to emerge as the largest party in this election campaign. That is for me something incredibly precious, because having devoted my adult life to serving the people of Scotland through the activities of the Scottish National Party, to have assumed the leadership of my party 2 years ago, and to take it to the position where I expect us to win the election today is a moment of enormous, enormous significance for me, and one from which I take enormous personal assurance and joy of the commitment that we've given to the people of Scotland, that they have rewarded us in the way that it appears they are rewarding us tonight and today. So to the people of Scotland, I express my warmest thanks for their support in this election campaign, and I look forward to following the results in the remainder of today and saying more later on today. But I promised during this election campaign that I would devote my life to the service of this country, and I'm profoundly grateful to the people of Scotland for indicating that they wish that to continue in the years to come. I will simply do all that I possibly can do to make Scotland a successful country and to improve the lives of the people of our country, and I look forward to doing that in the next Scottish parliamentary term. Thank you very much.
Well, very much a constituency speech there from John Swinney after the declaration in Perthshire North. He says he'll say more later on about the implications of the SNP winning this election, which he has just predicted they will do. We're at the very early stages of this count, he said, but it is clear the SNP will be the largest party. Let's have a quick look at the figures here. John Swinney with 16,414 votes and a majority of more than 6,000. The percentages, let's have a quick look. Turnout 58%. Can we see the percentages? Yes, we can. 45% of the votes to John Swinney, 28% to Reform, and 13% to Reform, 28% to the Conservatives, 8 and 6 to the Lib Dems and Labour, respectively. How does that change from 2021? John Swinney down 4%, Reform up, well, Reform 13%. They're up 13% because that was their entire vote. They didn't stand last time. Remember, the Tories down 11%, which perhaps gives a clue as to where that 13% came from. Interestingly, we think that number of votes for John Swinney wouldn't have won him it in 2021, Liz.
You know, across the board in this election, you know, no one can deny the SNP's vote share is down. But with the exception of Reform, so is pretty much everybody else's. The margins of victory by which the SNP is winning is actually, I think, larger than some of the ones that they had in 2021. Ailsa will correct me by the end of the day if I'm getting that wrong. But you're seeing people winning by sort of 6,000 votes, and they're doing well. You know, you have to go back to John Swinney taking over almost 2 years ago. Even just 18 months ago, sort of after the UK general election, this was not the outcome anybody predicted. And I think two things happened. To go back to the conversation that Alan and Bernard were having, I think Labour completely misinterpreted that election result in Scotland. There were SNP voters giving Labour votes to make sure they got the Tories out, and slightly, right, you let us down before, we're going to give you a chance again. Labour blew that chance. But those voters were also looking at an SNP that was a little bit chaotic and thinking, if you get your act together, we'll come back. What John Swinney's done is held the party together, got the government's act together, absolutely revolutionised the campaign machine in SNP headquarters. I mean, like, there has been a story for the last year about Labour's superior campaign machine. I think the SNP really sort of turned the volume up on theirs over the last year, because they know exactly what's happening today.
As Ailsa will, I'm sure, testify, and we'll come to this in detail later on, but John Swinney's job was to steady the ship. And he did, after the 2021 election, the approval for the Scottish Government was at 40%. It dropped about 20 when he took over, just under 20, and it's now touching 25. So he's stopped the decline, but he's got a long way to go to get it back up to where it was.
And also, I think there was something that John Swinney had to do, which I think he has done, and I think the sort of polling shows this, which was assert himself as the leader, the First Minister, instead of, you know, the person from the shadows or the caretaker. He's kind of owning that space quite well, and he's been able to do quite a positive-looking campaign going, in my time in office so far, I've done this bit of delivery, trust me to do some more, while everyone else has been campaigning against him. And the two narratives, the opposition one hasn't hit the SNP one, as parties like Labour would have liked it to.
Trust is an interesting word there, isn't it? He's campaigned quite hard on the kind of safe and steady thing. I mean, he wouldn't use the word boring, but I mean, he's often accused of being a bit dull, and he's saying in these crazy times, dull's what you want.
I mean, I saw an interview, I don't think it was a BBC one, where somebody was about to accuse him of being boring, and John Swinney cut in and said, reliable is the word that you're thinking of. He has embraced that in this election, and I think the SNP might initially have thought that you were going to have a sort of youthful, bouncy Anas Sarwar doing all this fun stuff around the campaign, a bit of razzmatazz, and that would overshadow them. But actually, this kind of stable, steady as she goes, responsible, head teacherly, you can trust me with the country as well.
Aberdeen Deeside declaring Stephen Flynn's seat, or the seat he wants. Let's see if he's got it.
For the Aberdeen Deeside and North Kincardine Scottish Parliament constituency. Electorate 62,985. Total votes cast 34,669, with a turnout of 55.04%. I, Angela Scott, constituency returning officer for the Scottish parliamentary election in the Aberdeen Deeside and North Kincardine constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes polled for each candidate at the election was as follows. Flynn Stephen Mark, Scottish National Party, 11,788. Kerr Liam, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 10,544. Lease Iris Alexandra, Independent, 431. Lee Matthew, Scottish Labour Party, 2,805. Massey Duncan Reform UK 6,113 and Sullivan Mell Scottish Liberal Democrats 2,880, giving total valid votes of 34,561. The total number of rejected votes was 108. The reason for rejection was as follows: lack of official mark, unique or unique identifying mark 0, voting for more than one candidate 19, writing or mark by which the voter could be identified 0, and unmarked or void for uncertainty 89, giving total rejected votes of 108. The following candidate is duly elected to serve as a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Aberdeen, Deeside and North Kincardine constituency: Flynn Stephen Mark, Scottish National Party.
So Stephen Flynn is on the move. He was the leader of the SNP at Westminster. He is now entering Holyrood as an MSP. Let's hear what he has to say about that.
Thank you very much, Angela, and to Stephen, David and the rest of the counting team here today, and of course to everyone who's partaken in making sure that democracy thrives here once again in Aberdeen. I want to start by paying tribute to two very special people. Firstly, my wonderful wife, Lynn, who puts up with a significant amount, and to the man in my life, my election agent, Doug Daniel. Thank you. To the people of Aberdeen and indeed Aberdeenshire who've put their faith in me to represent them in Scotland's national parliament, I cannot thank you enough. To those people in our city, in our region, who work in the oil and gas sector, know that in Scotland's parliament you will have no greater champion. To those who are struggling under the burden of Westminster's cost of living crisis, know that you will have nobody fighting on your behalf more than I. And for those young people who are searching for hope and for aspiration in their life, know that I and the SNP are very much on your side. It looks to most people like the SNP are going to win a 5th historic term in government in Scotland. And let it be known that soon Scotland will be an independent nation and we will thrive as a result. Thank you.
Interesting speech there from Stephen Flynn. Talked directly to three groups of people. Finally, to young people, we are on your side. People are struggling with the cost of living. I'll be your champion. But the first direct message he sent, perhaps no surprise in Aberdeen Deeside, to the oil and gas industry. You'll have no greater champion in the Scottish Parliament. Now, as a senior figure in a party whose position on oil and gas and exploration in the North Sea is still somewhat ambiguous, that is quite an interesting choice, quite an interesting running order in his speech. He now enters Holyrood as a very significant player in the SNP. Here he goes round the hall. We wait to see where he goes from there, because he is an ambitious man, Stephen Flynn. He'll certainly want to be troubling the cabinet, I would have thought, and who knows what after that. There have obviously been suggestions that he's a man who may find himself as leader of that party in the future. Right, Perth South is declaring. Let's go there.
Of the Scottish Parliament do hereby give notice that the votes cast for each candidate at the said election is as follows: Amanda Clark, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 4,329. Jim Fairley, Scottish National Party, 14,707. Ros McCall, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 9,646. Helen McDade, Reform UK, 5,128. And Luke Thompson, Scottish Labour Party, 2,599. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows: 146 in total, 126 of which were without an official mark, 16 voting for more candidates than the voter was entitled to, and 4 being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty. Percentage poll was 59.2%, and I hereby declare that Jim Fairley is duly elected, and I would like to invite Mr Fairley to make a statement, followed by other candidates.
So, Jim Fairley, the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity in the Scottish Parliament, is back.
An amazing thing to watch.
There he is, talking about his victory. It was a tight seat last time around. I think his majority was about 1,400. His notional majority was about 1,400. That's not Jim Fairley, that's John Swinney. Looking at Jim Fairley. They've just been at the same barber and optician. The same barber as me, before anybody, and Glenn, before anybody else says it. We're quadruplets, or whatever you call that, the 4 of us. Right, yeah, I tell you what, it was forecast to be tight. It was a 3% notional majority, Perthshire North. By my calculation, we don't have a graphic ready on that. We had a bit of a glitch with that graphic. By my calculation, he's home with about a 5,000 majority. Really, really safely home, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to take it in a round with Perthshire North and Aberdeen Deeside as well. Because what we're seeing really is that, well, first of all, in Perthshire North, he would not have taken the constituency on those figures last time, but that is an instance where the SNP vote share has gone up, which is rare.
Here's the Trinent declaration coming right now.
Yeah.
Grant Allen, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 2,057. Jones Tim, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 1,819. Ross Angela, Reform UK, 4,120. Sangster Catherine, Scottish Labour Party, 9,097. Smith Joe, Alliance to Liberate Scotland, 305. Therefore, I give public notice that Kate Campbell is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for the Edinburgh Eastern, Musselburgh and Trinent constituency.
There you go, another SNP hold. Kate Campbell, an Edinburgh councillor, chairs the Scrutiny Committee on the City of Edinburgh Council. Well, she's now the SNP MSP for Edinburgh Eastern, Musselburgh and Trinent, with a majority of almost 5,000. Turnout there, 52%. Talking of Edinburgh constituencies, there is Angus Robertson, who was the MSP for Edinburgh Central, was the Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution and External Affairs, is forecast perhaps to come third in his own constituency. He doesn't look too downbeat as he walks around the hall, but you wouldn't, would you, if you knew the cameras were on you? There's John Swinney with the aforementioned Matthew Swinney, fresh out of his Nat 5 maths exam. If the camera had stayed on them for a moment longer, we could assess his demeanour and see how we think he's done. But his father's passed today, that's for sure. He has been returned in Perthshire North. Right, listen, we've got quite a few results in and a few other bits and bobs to catch up on. So let's go to Laura Miller with the news.
Thank you, Martin. In the last hour, the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar has said that his party is hurting today and it's his job to hold the party here together. He stood by his call for the Prime Minister to resign and said that the results represented a national dissatisfaction.
I don't believe this election was about independence. I think this election, to be honest, was about a general dissatisfaction with politics. And sadly, there was a national wave in terms of that disappointment, and that's a national wave we failed to overcome.
Well, we have had the first seat to change hands in the Scottish Parliament election. The SNP's Hannah Mary Goodlad took Shetland from the Liberal Democrats. The others' seats to declare so far are all holds by the sitting party. Now, Goodlad used her acceptance speech to recognise the seismic nature of her win in a seat that's been in Liberal hands for more than 75 years.
It's been a conversation for 12 months. If you have voted one way your whole life, as Shetland majority has, then it's about having a conversation. It's about being transparent and visible and open. And that's exactly the kind of hopeful, positive campaign that we ran.
And within the last few minutes, SNP leader John Swinney has held his seat, Perthshire North. In his speech, he said he expects the SNP to be the largest party in the Scottish Parliament.
We are at the very early stages of the election count across the country. But it is becoming clear that the Scottish National Party is going to emerge as the largest party in this election campaign. That is for me something incredibly precious, because having devoted my adult life to serving the people of Scotland through the activities of the Scottish National Party, to have assumed the leadership of my party 2 years ago and to take it to the position where I expect us to win the election today is a moment of enormous, enormous significance for me, and one from which I take enormous personal assurance and joy.
OK, let's have a look then at how the council election results are unfolding in England. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, says he's not going to walk away after results show Reform picking up seats in former Labour heartlands. Reform have so far gained more than 600 councillors, and Labour have lost more than 400. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage says the results so far represents a truly historic shift in British politics, but there is still a way to go. Now, results have not only been bad for Labour in England, the Conservative Party has also been hemorrhaging votes. The party's leader remains optimistic, though. Kemi Badenoch has insisted there are signs of renewal for the Conservatives. Former Cabinet Minister Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg says the results show the need to unite the right.
Reform is doing extraordinarily well in places that voted Leave in the referendum. The Conservatives are still doing well in places that were the less Leave voting areas. If you combine that, it's an unstoppable force in British politics against a divided left and a sort of moribund Labour Party currently.
OK, back here then, we have been flagging the constituency results you should look out for. This time, we're looking at one of the regions, Central Scotland and West Lothian. The 7 seats up for grabs here are allocated using a formula which takes into consideration how many constituencies a party has won in the region and how many additional MSPs the party needs to ensure the makeup of all the MSPs elected reflects the vote in the regional ballot. When smaller parties, such as the Greens, get elected, it's usually on that regional vote. The Greens got their first MSP on the Central Scotland list at the last election. We'll see if they can improve on that this time. We should also look out for Reform. They got their first elected councillor in the Whitburn and Blackburn ward of West Lothian Council in December. All their other councillors and MSPs are defections from other parties at the moment. This is one of the areas where they have been polling strongly. So lots more to come in the next hour. We are expecting results from Eastwood, Renfrewshire and Edinburgh. That is the picture at the news desk. Back to Gary Robertson now.
Thank you for that, Laura. Yeah, in the last half hour, we've had that prediction of victory from John Swinney and a concession, in essence, from Anna Sarwar. Blair McDougall is a government minister in the UK government, Labour minister. How do you feel about Anna Sarwar's claim there, or at least his declaration of defeat?
Well, I think it's a recognition that there's lots of races that are pretty tight at the moment, but the sense is probably not enough to achieve the change that we'd hoped to achieve.
Sorry, I've got to stop you. We're going to Bamford Buchan.
The votes cast in the election is as follows. With an electorate of 61,536, total votes cast of 29,574, giving us a turnout of 48.06%. The votes cast for each candidate in the said election was as follows. Karen Adam, Scottish National Party, 10,374. James Adams, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 6,348. NDR McClellan, Independent, 555. Brooke Ritchie, Scottish Labour Party, 1,049. Conrad Strachan Ritchie, Reform UK, 10,010. Leslie Tarr, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1,162. In terms of rejected votes, 7 votes were rejected for voting for more than one candidate, 1 for writing on mark by which voter could be identified, none for a lack of official mark or unique identifier mark, and 68 for unmarked to avoid for uncertainty. And the following candidate is duly elected to serve as a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Banffshire and Buchan Coast, Karen Adam, Scottish National Party.
Well, there we have it. We were told this would be a tight constituency. We were told this may be where Reform took their first constituency seat, perhaps their only constituency seat. It was their best chance, we were told, and they've just missed it, but they've missed it by the skin of their teeth. 364 votes in it. You're looking at Karen Adam, the SNP MSP, now for Banffshire and the Buchan Coast. She has just taken that. If you look at the Conservative and Reform votes together, of course, that would have been a handsome victory if only one of those parties had stood, you would imagine. But there's the vote share. 35% to the SNP, 34% to Reform, 22% to the Tories. Let's have a look at the change from last time. Interesting, again, a double-digit drop for the SNP. The Tories down 21%. And a lot of those votes, you would imagine, would have gone to Reform. It took more than a third of the vote in that constituency. Right, listen, let's just have a quick chat around the table, because I feel there's quite a lot to catch up on here. Ailsa, you were suggesting the SNP's performance here, you've been suggesting, basically depends on who they're up against in each constituency.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case, but it does look like they're able to hold their own in the contest where they are facing the Conservatives as the second place party, in part because Reform is drawing support from that party. In terms of SNP Labour battlegrounds, I suspect we'll see much more variation on that. And I think that really speaks to the fragmentation of the party system that we're seeing. You know, in the last couple of elections, if you added up party 1, 2, and 3 together, you were getting normally 90% of the votes. But the polls and these results are suggesting that we're going to have that figure in the 70s as well. So we're going to see a considerable fragmentation of the vote, and as a result of that, we're also going to see that the vote share required to win is going to drop down as well.
Are you in a position as yet? I mean, look at that, Reform, 34% of the vote there. We're not seeing Reform picking up constituencies, but we didn't think they would in any great number. We do anticipate Reform may well make a big dent in the list seats, in the regional vote. Are you seeing a pattern that gives you confidence to predict what they might do?
Well, I think there's two things there. I mean, this constituency it's obviously a redrawn constituency. The boundary has moved south a wee bit, but it's a constituency that in 2016 would have been a majority Leave support. So it's not surprising that Reform has done particularly well. But if we look across all of these results that we've had so far, it does suggest that it's the YouGov MRP that is performing best. Now, they didn't get it right in terms of Shetland, and it's also the case that they're saying some of these constituency contests are too close to call. Eastwood, Dumbarton, Dumfriesshire, Aberdeenshire West, all too close to call. But you might remember that MRP was suggesting SNP on 62 seats, Reform in second place on 19, Labour 17, and then down from there.
OK, Bernard.
The seventh declaration we had was Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley, which the SNP won on a share of the vote of 33%. The Reform plus Labour totals was 47%. If you add in the Conservative totals, the Unionist vote in that constituency, 60%. but 33% gets the SNP over the line because of that dynamic that we referred to right at the top of the programme, which was Reform UK. Aberdeenshire, Deeside, North Kincardine, the SNP win with a 34% vote share, but the combined referendum and Conservative vote, 48%.
And Edinburgh South declaring now.
Declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows. Samita Kumar, Scottish National Party, 11,727. Katrina Monroe, Scottish Labour Party, 8,438. Cameron Rose, Reform UK, 3,936. Sue Webber, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 4,636. And Andy Williamson, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 3,672. Therefore, I give public notice that Samita Kumar is duly elected as the member of the Scottish Parliament for the Edinburgh South Western constituency.
So the SNP hold Edinburgh South Western and hold it fairly comfortably. Sunita Kumar home with a majority of more than 3,200. Let's have a quick look at the vote share in that constituency, where the turnout was 53%. The SNP, 36% of the votes. Labour, 26%. The Conservatives on 14%. Reform on 12%. The Lib Dems on 11%. Let's have a look at how that's changed over the past 5 years. There you go. The SNP down 7%. Labour up 3% and the Tories down 13%. Let's go to Perth. The First Minister can join us down the line. John Swinney, you are the returning MSP for Perthshire North. I think we can see you. Can we see John Swinney? Let's see if we can get him up on screen. Yes, there he is. John Swinney, congratulations. Returning MSP for Perthshire North. I congratulate you on that. I won't congratulate you on the broader result yet. But you are confident, I think, from your acceptance speech, that you are going to end up the largest party in this Parliament.
I am, Martin, and let me express my thanks to the people of Perthshire North who have once again asked me to represent them in the Scottish Parliament, and I deeply am honoured by their support. And I think across the country a pattern is beginning to emerge, although it's early days in the election, which demonstrates the SNP is, after 19 years in power, going to emerge as by far the largest party in the Scottish Parliament. And I think that's a reflection of the work that we've undertaken to rebuild public confidence and trust in the Scottish National Party, and I'm delighted that we are looking at such an optimistic situation as the election results emerge.
Do you take this as an endorsement of your party, or is it perhaps the electorate saying that you're the best of a bad bunch? There doesn't seem to be much love for politics across the board at the moment. Can you really represent this as a complete endorsement of you and your policies?
I certainly acknowledge that there are concerns and worries and anxieties right across the population within Scotland. And when I became First Minister, I said that I would act to serve all of the people of Scotland, and I reiterate that pledge today as I lead my party into the situation that we face after this election, that we will act always to serve all of the people of Scotland. And of course, in the outcomes that have come forward already, we see that we have won Shetland, a constituency we have never held by the Liberals for over 70 years, and that's a part of Scotland that I look forward to ensuring is right at the heart of the governance of Scotland in the years to come, as will all parts of Scotland be at the heart of governance. We're in difficult days just now, and one of the central parts of our election campaign was the offer from me of trusted and reliable leadership to serve the people of Scotland, and that's what I hope to be able to deliver in the aftermath of this election.
We also remember what you said in this campaign about a mandate for another independence referendum. You set yourself a very high bar. The SNP coming home with more than 65 seats, you said, would constitute a mandate, nothing else. There's a long way to go. There are a lot of votes to be counted, a lot of declarations to happen. But can we ask you now, as the votes have all been cast, whether or not you will stick to that? If you do not receive 65 seats in the next Parliament, will you put independence to one side for 5 years? John Swinney, can you hear me? I think we've lost the line to Mr. Swinney. Let's just, we'll endeavour to restore that, as you would expect. I wonder if Mr. Swinney can hear me. If you can, just say in the background. I don't think he can. We're gonna try and work on the gremlins there, whatever they are, and get back to him. That's disappointing, because that was a very significant question. I'm hopeful that we'll get him back. And what do you think he would have said, Glenn Campbell?
I think he might have been cautious about that. He's been deliberately saying he believes the SNP will win. I think there he went a bit further and said that they would be by far the largest party.
Rather than predict, let's hear what he has to say, because I think John Swinney is back. Mr. Swinney, can you hear me?
I can, Martin,
you can,
yes.
Brilliant. Listen, that's great. Let me just ask you that question again in that case. You said in the campaign 65 seats, a majority for the SNP, would be the mandate you needed to go to Westminster and demand an independence referendum. Can I ask you now, if you do not, if you do not achieve that, if you don't, get over that bar, will you park independence as an issue for the next 5 years?
What I've got to do is to wait and study the results that come out from the election campaign. I'm very clear already that the SNP is going to be the leading party out of this election, and by a considerable margin. What we have to consider is what's the final makeup of the Scottish Parliament, and that will obviously have a bearing on a whole host of different policy questions. But I set out my approach to governing Scotland, if I have the privilege to continue that work in the years to come. And we will engage constructively with Parliament and with the public about making sure that we act always to improve the lives of people in Scotland. I obviously believe that is best achieved by Scotland being an independent country, and I will do all that I can to make sure that becomes a reality.
But when you say you look at the makeup of the Scottish Parliament, that sounds to me like you might consider claiming that a pro-independence majority rather than an SNP majority is a mandate for another referendum. You ruled that out previously. Are you ruling it in now?
We're a wee bit early for these kind of detailed conversations, Martin. What I'm certain about is that the people of Scotland will, by the end of today, have given their support to the SNP as the leading party in the elections. And I am so pleased that all the hard work that's gone in the length and breadth of the country by my party supporters has got the response it's got from the people of Scotland. And I look forward, if the opportunity presents itself to me, to continue to serve the people of Scotland as First Minister.
You're right, we are earlier. Are you confident you'll get 65 seats? Are you optimistic?
I'm optimistic. Obviously, we've got to wait and see all of the declarations that take place. At this early stage, I'm optimistic about that, and we have put a huge amount of effort around the country to make sure that we can be successful in this election. And of one thing I'm absolutely certain, is the SNP is going to be the leading party coming out of this election, and the only party able to provide the type of stable government that Scotland will need in the aftermath of this election.
If you do form a government, can I just ask you finally one other policy that we all remember from the campaign? Price caps in supermarkets. When can we expect you to cap the price of bread?
We'll be taking the legislative steps to take that forward within the first 100 days, just like I promised that we would do. But it obviously depends on Parliament deciding if we're going to form the government, but that will be one of the central commitments, because what I promised the people of Scotland was that I would act, and I'd act decisively to help them in their time of need in meeting the challenges of the cost of living, and that's exactly what I will do.
All right, listen, John Swinney, returning MSP for Perthshire North. Congratulations on your victory in your constituency. We shall wait and see what happens across the rest of the country. Perhaps we'll speak to Mr Swinney again before our programme ends. We'll certainly hear from him again, I'm sure, before much longer as the results become clear. What do you make of what you just heard, Bernard?
Well, he said he was optimistic of the 65. I think that it's perfectly clear if they land at the 65, then he will demand it because he's said it. The much more interesting question is the question that you put, in which he sidestepped, which is that if he falls short of 65, but there's a pro-independence majority in the Parliament, and my view is there will be a pro-independence majority in the Parliament, what does he do in those circumstances? I've always thought it a curious strategy. Maybe Liz can shed some light on all of this, that the SNP's essential argument is that they believe in the sovereignty of the people to assert their constitutional future. And yet when it comes to demanding an independence referendum, only SNP votes apart to count in terms of this popular sovereignty. So it's a peculiar position for a nationalist First Minister to say that in terms of prosecuting the constitutional case, he dismisses the pro-independence votes of people who vote Green, that only SNP votes count in terms of asserting Scottish sovereignty. Liz is shaking her head.
So is Glenn.
I'm shaking my head at the overacting, I think, mostly. I think there's two...
Liz first, then Glenn. But Liz, you're a strategist. You're a professional political strategist. What do you make of that strategy?
There's two parts to this sort of play for a majority. So, A, it's been about motivating the campaign. But where John Swinney is about the precedent of what had to happen for a referendum to be granted in the past. And that was a single-party pro-independence majority. Of course, there were more MSPs in favour of independence in that parliament than just the SNP. But when it was conceded by the UK government, it was conceded on that single-party majority. So he has been arguing for that because it is the precedent and the desire to argue that precedent with the UK government that he has been clinging to and that he is looking to achieve today. What I would say, before we go to that, is that I don't think that rules out if there is a pro-independence majority, and I think there is likely to be the largest pro-independence majority in this parliament than there has been in all parliaments, if we get above 72 pro-independence MSPs.
But he can't use that as a mandate, really, can he, unless he goes back on his word?
Well, I don't think that is the word, because I think if you have that,
I think
he still has the argument that there is a pro-independence parliament. And so he can still argue for it, but he can't use the precedent argument that he was wanting to use with the UK government.
Glenn Campbell, that wasn't the message we got as an electorate, was it, going into this election?
Well, no, he was seeking the overall majority in order to push this case, but as far as I know, he's never given up on the idea that an SNP plus Greens majority is, in his view, enough for there to be an independence referendum. He's just acknowledging that that's happened over a number of years, and the UK government has said, well, you know, tough, you're not getting one. So he thought pushing for the overall majority might be the bit extra that would break down the objections of the UK. But he said there's going to be a vote, a debate and a vote in Parliament as item number 1 on this issue, and I think that will still go ahead if the SNP and Greens together have a majority for independence. Whether it'll make the blindest bit of difference or not is a different matter.
All right.
And the party was briefing to that effect.
Glenn, thanks for that. Much more from this panel very shortly. Let's go down to Phil Sim, though. What's going on, Phil?
Just having a look at the national picture. You know it's serious because I've got the laptop with me now. Looking at across I was very struck by that result in Banffshire and Buchan Coast, the fact the SNP just clear a Reform. But the Reform and Tory votes together, as Bernard was pointing out, easily could have won that seat if they had been one party. And that fracturing, we're now seeing evidence of that across the country. So if you take all of the seats that are declared so far, the SNP are sitting on about 40% of the vote. And then behind them, you've got the Labour on 18, Reform on 16. Reform are briefly in second place, both on votes and share after that result in Banffshire. So yeah, Labour 18, Reform 16, Conservatives 13.5. So they're all bunched together in this current fight for second place. And it really shows the way that the votes of the parties which have run their campaigns as Stop the SNP, well, between them, they have split the vote around. And that is why I think we're seeing the SNP able to win these seats on quite a big reduction in their share of the vote regardless.
Phil, thank you very much indeed for that. Listen, there's loads going on. Let's find out what Gary and his politicians make of it all. Gary.
Yeah, we've got some new faces here to welcome to our panel. Shona Robertson, of course, former Finance Secretary in the last administration for the SNP. Blair McDougall still with us for Labour. Harriet Cross, MP here for the Conservatives. We've got Susan Murray, MP for the Liberal Democrats. And for the Greens, we have John Molyneux. And for Reform, Jamie Maguire. Afternoon to all of you. I just want to pick up Blair McDougall. We were just chatting and we went away to a declaration. That concession from Anas Sarwar, is he the person to blame for Labour's defeat in this election as he sees it, or does the Prime Minister have to share that blame?
Well, I think the Prime Minister was clear this morning that he understands that there is a dissatisfaction with the speed with which we're delivering on the change that we promised. We are...
And Anas Sarwar's paying the price for that?
I think we're all paying the price for that. We've all got a responsibility for that. I think Anas has done remarkable things to professionalise our campaign, to modernise our party. And we may not get where we wanted to get to today, but I've just been told, for example, we are now going to gain the Western Isles from the SNP, so there shall be at least some accountability for SNP failings over the last few years.
We'll see how that pans out. That concession speech, Harriet Cross, are we going to hear something similar from Russell Finlay in the coming hours?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I mean, it's undoubtable that so far results have been mixed. We saw a great result in Aberdeen Deeside for Conservatives, very close in second place behind Stephen Flynn, a fantastic result there. And we're hearing that in some of the other Aberdeenshire seats, Aberdeenshire East, Aberdeenshire West, we're doing well as well. It's too early yet to say what's going to happen by the end of the day.
But you're likely to retain that second place that you had last time round. Douglas Ross was on the programme earlier, conceding that that would be the case.
We need to wait until the list plays out. As you know, as we all know here, the list is where the majority of the seats, for other than the SNP, normally get played out. So we need to wait for those to come through to actually see where everyone stands. It's undoubtable that this has been a tough electoral cycle for us. We came to this with our eyes open. We aren't naive. We weren't naive about that either. But we need to wait until the end of the day to see actually where things stand, how we compare to other parties, where other parties are, because everyone is going to be looking at those lists and see where they pan out at the end of the day.
Things going well for your party, Shona Robertson. After 19 years in power, it looks as though you'll be the largest party, George Swinney saying there. How much is that down to reform, splitting the vote, as we've been talking about?
So it is quite something that we look like we're going to win for the fifth consecutive time. It is astonishing. A lot of it is down to John Swinney's leadership and bringing a positive offer to the people. We were the only party offering positive policies. The rest, it was all about stopping us, and I don't think that's played well with the electorate at all, and I think the other parties are going to pay the price for that.
We saw the current SNP leader being re-elected, John Swinney. Did we also see the next SNP leader, Stephen Flynn, being elected
Well,
too?
you know, this is about John Swinney leading the SNP into another victory and becoming the First Minister of Scotland, hopefully all being well for the rest of the results. And he will be around for quite some time.
We're going to go to Eastwood because we're getting the result from there now.
Being the returning officer for the Eastwood constituency, declare that the total number of votes given to each candidate is as follows. Jackson Carlaw, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 11,990. Ewan Robert Davidson, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1,748. John Mooney, Reform UK, 3,453. Kirsten Francis Oswald, Scottish National Party, 12,722. Kayleigh Quinn, Scottish Labour Party, 8,368. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. For want of official mark, 0. Writing or mark by which the voter can be identified, 2. Unmarked for void for uncertainty, 198. Voting for more than one candidate, 14. Total number of rejected votes.
So there we have it. Eastwood has declared, and Kirsten
214.
Oswald, who served 2 terms
Therefore,
as an
I give
SNP
public notice
MP
that
for East
Kirsten
Grenfreshire
Frances
is going to Holyrood to become the SNP MSP for Eastwood. Jackson Carlaw, former leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, has been defeated by just 732 votes. It's always the biggest turnout, Eastwood. Look at that, 66% of the electorate there turned out. I tell you, one Tory who will be very happy at that result will be Russell Finlay, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, because there was a thought that if Jackson Carlaw had held his seat, that seat would be disadvantageous to the Tories on the list vote. It might kill off Russell Finlay's best chance of getting back to Holyrood. And actually, if Jackson Carlaw had won, the former leader, it might have decapitated. They thought the Scottish Conservative Party at Holyrood might have knocked their current leader out. It seems now Russell Finlay probably will get back in on the list vote. We're just waiting. There's the Count Centre in Dumfries, the Galloway and Dumfries West Declaration. Here we go. There it is. Let's listen.
For the Scottish Parliament election for the Galloway and West Dumfries constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes polled for each candidate was as follows. Senga Beresford, Reform UK, 4674, 4,674. Finlay Carson, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 11502, 11,502. Emma Harper, Scottish National Party, SNP, 9903, 9,903. Jack McConnell, Scottish Labour Party, 2544, 2,544. Tracy Warman, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1380, 1380. I hereby declare that Finlay Carson, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, has been duly elected to serve as the member of the Scottish Parliament for the Galloway and West Dumfries constituency.
So the Conservatives have their first constituency win. Finlay Carson, the incumbent in Galloway and West Dumfries, holding on to the seat there with a majority of just over 1,500, I think, from Emma Harper of the SNP. There we go, turnout 52%, but that is the first Conservative constituency victory. There was a thought, I mean, Ailsa was saying earlier on, look out for the Conservative constituencies down and around the south of the country. If they can hold them, it really does impact the SNP's chances of getting an overall majority. Significant then, right?
It does, and this was the most marginal one, right? So if they've taken this one, we would assume that the Dumfriesshire seat and the Ettrick, Roxburgh and Berwickshire seat are also safe as well. But again, turnout down and a hammering of votes. You know, Conservatives losing 6,000 votes in that constituency, SNP down 5, and narrowing of the margin as well.
Right, OK, listen, while we've been watching all of that and while we've been chatting here, there have been other declarations. Here's some news from the Western Isles. Have a look at this. Let's get the graphic up on screen if we can. Yes, Naheela Ananier, a Labour gain from the SNP by 154 votes. Donald McKinnon is to be the Labour MSP for Naheela Ananier. Taking the constituency from the SNP. Alistair Allen in second place, just 154 votes behind. Malcolm McTaggart at Reform in third place. Can we see the vote share for the Western Isles? Yes, we can. 38 to 36, Labour from the SNP. What's the change look like, though, from 5 years ago? There we go. Labour up 10% in Naheela Ananier, and the SNP down 15%. local issues perhaps at play there? Somebody, the word ferries was used around this table, perhaps by Liz Lloyd.
I think Alistair Allen's been a very good constituency MSP, but I think there has been serious issues with the ferry service over the course of the election campaign.
We've got more catching up to do. Paisley, what happened there? We can have a look. Here is the graphic. SNP hold it. George Adam, very popular local MSP, seeing off Neil Bibby by 3,000 votes, and Alec Leishman in fourth place there with just over 4,500 for Reform. The vote share in Paisley, here we go, there it is, 43% to 33%. The SNP 10% clear of Labour, and Reform in third place with 15% of the vote. How does that change from 5 years ago? There you go, the SNP holding it despite dropping 8% of their vote. Labour up just 1. Let's go to Fife. Cowdenbeath has declared. What did they do? The SNP held it. David Barrett has a majority there of just over 5,500 from Fiona Sword of Labour. Reform showing up there fairly strongly as well with almost 5,000 votes. The vote share in Cowdenbeath, that's interesting, 17% of the votes going to Reform, 23% to the SNP, but the clear winners, to Labour rather, but the clear winners with 44%. Again, the SNP. Right, let's have a look at the change from last time. The SNP dropping just 4% there, Labour down 7%, and of course, Reform up 17% because they didn't stand last time. Let's go to Lindsay Bewes. A lot of chat about Edinburgh Central and the fate of Angus Robertson, one of the big beasts of the SNP, who has been projected may actually finish third in the constituency he holds. Lindsay Bewes is at the count. What's happening?
Hi, Martin. Yes, well, we've just been briefed by the Scottish Greens that they are very confident of a victory for Lorna Slater, their candidate for Edinburgh Central. They are all but calling that seat now. They're saying that they are going to win it by a reasonably significant margin over the SNP's Angus Robertson. We had thought it might be quite a close three-way contest between the Greens, the SNP and Labour, but the Greens now saying that they're very confident of a very definitive victory in that Edinburgh Central seat. They believe that Angus Robertson will finish in second place ahead of Scottish Labour, but that is a significant result for the SNP, a poor result for the SNP here. They're losing a big figure from the party, somebody who has been a major figure in the Scottish Government and in the SNP for a long period of time. Angus Robertson arrived at the count a little while ago.